Hi everyone, my name is Carla Maria Reale and I am a postdoctoral researcher at University of Genoa in the framework of the Gender X project, which is funded by EU and it is an Horizon 2020 project. I have a PhD in comparative constitutional law from University of Trento, and I've been a visiting researcher at University of Maynooth, at University of Galway in Ireland, and also at University of Lund in Sweden. Uh, I am passionate about gender studies. We can say somehow that my main research interest is the relationship between identity, body, and law, fundamental rights. I've been working a lot on disability rights and LGBTIQ issues, always with an intersectional approach. I believe I need to mention that I really believe in the importance of interdisciplinarity. I am part of the BioLaw Research Group in Trento, and I'm also part of the Center for Interdisciplinary Gender Studies at University of Trento. We can say that gender issues, but also disability issues and LGBTIQ issue in general represent a huge challenge to our society because they represent a huge challenge to the whole architecture of law. Uh, we tend to consider law as something neutral, but on the contrary, law is not neutral at all. Especially in the past, law used to crystallize the viewpoint of the dominant group of individuals in our societies. I mean, middle class, straight white men, and stuff like this. So, law had basically a huge role in perpetuating discrimination and oppressions in our society. And this is what really motivated me, the fact that law might be part of discrimination and oppression, but at the same time, law might have a transformative role in our society. Law might be a powerful tool in order to change our society and to obtain social justice. So I really want to understand how to fully enact the principle of equality in our society, of self-determination, but also solidarity. We live in complex society, and I'd like also to understand how law can interact with social movements, because there are real life needs and issues born from people made of flesh and bone. And I really believe that law and legislation need to find answer to this kind of question. A super quick example. The Western legal tradition is based in this idea of the gender binary. So the fact that people can be divided in two groups, men and women. But what happens if more and more people start to identify as non binary or to intersex people? It's not up to them to fit in the given norms. On the contrary, it's the legislation that needs to be updated. It's a matter of fundamental rights. Yes, for example, during my PhD journey, I've been working on a project regarding sexuality, disability, and law, which then became a book. Uh, I believe that we all know from our own experience that sexuality is a very important issue for each and every one of us. It touches our relational selves and our identities. And Finger, a very important disability activist from US, said that sexuality is the source of the deepest oppression for people with disability, the source of their deepest pain. So the sexual sphere of people with disability is surrounded by many stereotypes, misconception, and is dominated by primary denial, censorship, and stigma. And as I mentioned before, of course, law reflect this paradigm. But what happens if the desexualization of people with disability plays also a key role in the social marginalization of them? I believe that somehow in this scenario, law needs to intervene both with negative rights, so non-interference in the sexual sphere of people with disability, but also with positive rights in order to contrast social barriers in this field and promoting personal development. So my whole PhD project was about understanding how law could intervene in this sphere and why law should intervene in this sphere, which is perceived usually as something very intimate and private. The intersection of sexuality and disability represents somehow a very concrete call to action for the legal field, because of course there's nothing like a monolithic rights regarding sexuality, but there are a multitude of sexuality related rights that are connected to the exercise of fundamental rights, and these kind of rights need to be granted. So this implies, for example, pushing for the medicalization of the sexuality of people with disability while granting sexual and reproductive health, or developing tools for personal assistance in the field of sexuality and also sexual facilitation, for example. Of course, all this kind of intervention need specific policies and regulation that need to be implemented in the light of the principle of self-determination, non-discrimination, and equality. And all these principles are very common in all constitution, but also in international human rights law. So in this case, again, we can see how law can push for a social change that is needed. Law might have a very important role in affirming the existence of the agency of people with disability as sexual beings in our society. That's a very complicated question, but yeah, I believe that I would like to have a positive impact on our society by make it more sensitive and prone somehow to recognizing how the demands coming from the most marginalized group in our societies are not minoritarian issues. On the contrary, they represent the core of our democracies. And yeah, on the other hand, I would also like to see a change in my own field, so in academia, in research. And for example, I really believe that as legal scholars, we should be nourished by the inputs coming from the social tissue, by social needs, but also that we should embrace more interdisciplinarity for our research to have a real impact on people's lives.